Good morning, Nigeria, and welcome to Daybreak, reaching you live from the nation's capital in Abuja. I am Aiwelia. Thank you for joining us this morning, and it's great to have you.
And I'm Zainab Bada. Thank you for joining us on the program this morning. I hope you had a wonderful night rest.
And we are inching closer to the weekend. What are your plans? Are you planning to jet out, as some people say? I mean, quite a lot really going on, and some of the stories are not looking good. Really, if you look at the front pages of our newspapers, which is what we're going to do on the program this morning. And today is also International Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women. Are you checking out on your mothers, on your sisters? And I mean, some of them are married, some of your siblings are married. Are you checking on them? Are they doing very well? I think these are very important things. And for those who are experts in bullying women, I think that you should have a rethink because, yes, because soon and very soon the law will catch up with you. I mean, I saw the figures released by the United Nations about a number of rape cases in the last 2020,
Yeah,
to be
quite
precise,
alarming
about
because of the COVID-19
11,200
pandemic.
just in 1 year.
Right, yes.
You know, so I think that we need to, as men, do what we need to do to make sure that we see an end to this. It's not just only when it affects you, but it takes a holistic approach. You know, as a society, we must frown at these, you know, I would say very wicked and very, very bad habits of treating women in inhumane ways, really.
Terrible, sad. Now, the UN Secretary Generals will unite by 2030 to end violence against women campaign, marking the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence under the global theme Orange the World, Fund, Respond, Prevent and Collect. Now, UN Women's Generation Equality Campaign is amplifying the call for global action to bridge funding gaps, ensure essential services for survivors of violence during the COVID-19 crisis, focus on prevention and collection of data that can improve life-saving services for women and girls. The campaign is also building up to launch bold new actions and commitments to end violence against women at the Generation Equality Forum in Mexico and in France in 2021.
Very interesting. So, in your little way, you should do something differently this time around as we, mark this day. Now, let's take a look at the events of the 25th of November in world history, just to have a sense of other activities that are being marked on this day. Please stay with us.
right, quite interesting, lineup of number of events that happened on the 25th of November. Now, in 2003, Nigeria's President Olusegun Obasanjo said he will surrender ousted Liberian leader Charles Taylor to face a war crimes trial if Liberia asks. Today, as we earlier mentioned, is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. And in 1973, military coup in Greece. In 1960, assassination of the Mirabal sisters. And in 1963, the body of assassinated President John F. Kennedy is buried at Arlington National Cemetery. And in 1964, 11 nations give a total of $3 billion to rescue the value of the British currency.
Very interesting facts there, historical facts there for you. Now, let's take a look at the dailies on Daybreak this morning. And we have Sunday Michael, the Deputy Business Editor of Daily Trust newspaper, in the studio to review the stories with us this morning shortly after this break. Please stay with us.
But in a situation where you find that you look at the same,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
because I have said that.
All right, let's begin with the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. EFCC places Anambra Governor Obiano on watch list. On page 1, you'd find Reps probe 97 billion naira federal government cancer control project. And on page 5, federal government mulls 2.4 trillion palliative as 1.8 trillion naira annual subsidy goes. One of the riders, no provision in 2022 budget. That's according to Senate. No template to reach the poor. You'd also see 5,000 transport grant for 6 to 12 months. That's according to the minister. And Labour knocks government, says palliative abate. You'd also find on page 18 of the Daily Trust newspaper, Nigeria Air to commence operations April 2022. That's according to the federal government. You'd also find SSCE, pay your debts, NECO tells state governments. 2023, throw presidential ticket open. Babangida Aliu tells PDP. And you'd also find ICPC arraigns Kano local government chair over revenue misappropriation.
All right, let's take a look at other papers this morning. And the Nation newspaper, for instance, has the story, exam fees, NACO withholds candidates' results in debtor states. You'd also find why Lagos Kano need 1% extra allocation in proposed revenue formula. The next story there, JAMB uncovers 706,189 illegal admissions. You'd find also NCC extends deadline for submission of bids for 5G. Below the nameplate, you'd find the story, 5 kidnapped suspects held. Courts to immigration release orderly's passport. You would also see the story 1.39 trillion naira Lagos budget for 2022 with the rider education infrastructure top priorities. Nigeria Air to provide 70,000 jobs after takeoff next April, says Sirika. You'd also see the lead story saying Labour rejects proposed petrol price hike by government. Source of 5,000 transport grant to 40 million Nigerians not yet determined, says Minister. Senate, no provision for palliative in next year's budget. NLC, no agreement with government. These are the major stories on the Punch this morning.
Okay, let's take a look at other stories on the Guardian newspaper this morning. The lead story there, COVID-19 December 1st deadline. only 3% eligible Nigerians fully vaccinated. And of the riders, Lagos, Ogun, Oyo, Kano, Kaduna to top list of states with vaccinated persons. The other rider states lawyers divided over legality of forced vaccination on citizens. And you have a breakdown of the number of people that have taken the first and the second dose right there. And on page 2 of the Guardian newspaper, NLC rejects proposed 5,000 stipend to replace petrol subsidy. And on page 4, you'd find Nigeria's economy too weak to support press freedom. That's according to Oloja. And on page 4, Sanwo-Olu budgets 1.38 trillion naira for 2022 as education tech takes 171.6 billion. You'd also find secret employment ongoing in civil service, Senate alleges. INEC boss pledges to supervise direct primary if Buhari signs bill. And you'd also see, don't dictate to Buhari on Kanu's release. Ohaneze tells ACF others. So these are some of the stories on The Guardian.
All right, on the Punch newspaper, the first story at the very top, you'll find that story on page 25. It says, 5G, Nigerians should expect smart cities, self-driving car facilities, says NCC. Interesting, just like we've seen in the movies. Nigeria is about to go digital
right,
in every phase of it. All right, we'll also see the story there with 49% foreign ownership. Nigeria Air starts operations April 2022. Senate alleged secret recruitment into federal civil service. Also, you see vandalism. Oil sector GDP contribution drops by 270 billion naira in 9 months. The lead story on the Punch newspaper, subsidy. Nigerians to spend 6.7 trillion naira on fuel in 2022. NLC Senate fault 5,000 naira palliative. With the riders, Nigerians to pay additional 34 trillion naira annually on petroleum consumption. Cost of doing business will increase. Fuel-induced inflation inevitable. That's according to Manufacturing Association of Nigeria. At the very bottom, you see the stories. Lagos proposes 59% capital expenditure. Sanwo-Olu presents 1.388 trillion naira budget. And then you'd also find estate residents protest land grabbers invasion, demand Lagos intervention. And also the last story at the bottom there says, stop Obiano from leaving Nigeria after tenure, EFCC tells immigration. So here we are. These are the major stories on the Punch newspaper. Now let's get perspectives on these stories. We have in the studio Sunday Michael, like we told you, Deputy Business Editor, Daily Trust newspaper, to get perspectives on the stories. The story about federal government palliative and the proposed removal of subsidy is virtually everywhere on the newspapers this morning. Should we be excited that at least there's a plan to provide some kind of palliative to cushion the effects of removing these subsidies on Nigerians?
Excited. I don't know who got any kind of palliative in this country to be excited about the announcement of another one. Palliatives in Nigeria is synonymous to fraud, to put it straightforward. And to think that we are saying that we are already spending too much on something that is shredded in mystery, if you like, that is costing us so much. And then we say, okay, because this is costing us so much, we want to replace it, and then we bring a bigger monster, into the system. It's inconceivable how people in government sit down and come up with this kind of idea. It beats everyone's imagination, that we are proposing as a country to put out 2.4 trillion unbudgeted on account. And if you break down our budget parameters, our debt service, which is how much we use to service debt in the current budget, is not far from this figure. So why would you throw this away if we can reduce the debt burden of the country? What about sectorial allocation? There is no single sector in the 2022 budget that is going to get as much as 2.4 trillion. Not education, not agric, not health, not even the comatose power situation in the country. So why do we want to, raise that kind of amount and put them through channels that nobody can account for in the name of palliative or whatever we call it? So it's ridiculous, to put it mildly. Okay. What the government is proposing.
In regards to this story, experts are saying Nigeria don't even have, a credible social register. So how do they even plan to reach the poor?
That is the most appalling part of all of this. What if, before you even get to the register, what is even our metrics for determining who is poor? And then you move on to the issue of register. Where is the register? The last time we had issues around palliatives and people demanded for those registers, they kept saying the registers exist, but because of the dignity of the people on the registers, they would not disclose them. So at what point do we begin to talk about accountability about this register? Who generated them? How? And where? And what is the sharing formula of this register? So we have 36 states plus Abuja. Mm-hmm. How did you determine the number of those poor and from where? So these are all questions the government have not answered. And to think that you want to sink, we've been giving out 500 billion annually in the last 3 or 4 years to that so-called number of poor people nobody knows anything about, and we want to sink another 2.4 trillion. By the time this government rounds up at the rate they are going, we would have sinked around 4 trillion naira to a faceless group. And the government is comfortable providing this kind of explanations to a citizen. I'm sure they are very sure we will just take these things hook, line, and sinker, and nobody will react. It's painful.
Now, from the explanation of the minister, that some of the details, or the methods of going about this is not even yet ready. They are still working on coming up with modalities on how to, share this money. And we have just barely few months away from the removal of the subsidy, which is the target is April next year. And so, is this feasible? Is this realistic?
Amazing, right? The minister is saying April. The group managing director of the NNPC, or the CEO of the National Oil Company, is saying as early as February. We are not even sure what the timelines are. And because all of these speculations are now in the public domain, we are seeing filling stations refusing to sell fuel, deliberately shutting people out in anticipation that they will wake up one morning and these announcements will come to play. But analysts are divided about the government capacity or the political will to even do some of these things. And this apprehension are along several lines. For some people, they feel the petroleum subsidy is an emotional issue, and it's something that triggers the average Nigerian, because it has multiplier effect on the price of food, cost of transportation, etc. And we are approaching an election year. Would they have the balls really to want to drive along this path? That's on the one hand. Others have the fears that Labour would just not take this in, especially given that a number of other increases are expected. They've told us that the electricity subsidy will go. It means you and I will pay even more for the near absence of electricity that we have seen in our homes. They are talking about several other increases. Some have even taken effect. Today you are buying gas 12 kg cylinder at 10,000 naira, more than 2.5 times what it used to be. So that's an increase you have to absorb. The next thing, once these things come up, the schools of your wards will start writing you to tell you the cost of providing service for your wards have gone up. We have to review prices. Your landlords would as well reach you and say, hey, whatever was a fair price yesterday is no longer tenable for the space you occupy, so we also have to review. So that's how this system works. The market woman will say, okay, since there is enough money going around in the market, you think you should pay more for tomatoes. Who bears this brunt? And you know, that is where we are worried about. Then you have a government that is not sure about what it wants to do, coming out to make announcements as though you have concluded, and then when people raise eyebrow and point at gray areas, you said, oh, you are still thinking about. Why are you making pronouncements and heating up the system if you have not concluded on what you want to do?
Right. Talking about, making pronouncements, the Senate is saying there's no provision for this in the 2022 budget.
Yeah.
And it seems like there is no synergy, between the executive and these other
It's funny how systems work. By our own Fiscal Responsibility Act, you should not spend what you have not provisioned for. It's a crime, it's illegal, that is misappropriation in its highest form. That you could even spend this huge amount of money without a budgetary template, your budget template. So if you add 2.4 trillion from this petroleum subsidy to the 13.5 or thereabout trillion they are proposing, it then means in actual sense that we are having a budget of over 15 trillion, but only 13 trillion that is captured, without anybody showing up in the Senate to defend this amount of spending. You just make pronouncement and you will hit the coffers of the federal government and execute it. It's strange. At any rate, the way every state of the federation will want to approach its poorest of the poor may differ. In some states, it's probably how to provide them with healthcare systems and clean water for the benefit of all. For others, maybe improve the number of classrooms so that they can get the wards in school. In some others, it may just be food. Why would you just sit somewhere and split money amongst people across various states and call them palliative?
Okay, now, either ways, whichever way we look at it, there are some facts that still remain. That there's need for the removal of this subsidy.
Yeah.
The IMF have advised, on that. And then, the realities are glaring on our faces, really. So, but how do we go about this? Where should we be channeling our energy and our priority, to, provide this cushion so that Nigerians don't feel the effects as much?
The IMF, the World Bank, and even some development economists in Nigeria have said, yes, remove, but it has to be systemic. And part of that systemic recommendation is that you must have something to cushion the impact. You can't take away something that has been there and expect people to just sit easy, right? And so they talked about mass transit system, completely absent in Nigeria. Development economics have said the best time for removals is allow one or two of the turnaround maintenance in the refineries to start happening so that we can start producing locally, and then you can begin. Because if you produce locally, part of the reason why the landing cost is being proposed at 340 is the cost of importing this equipment. So if you remove all that import component and you are refining locally, then it means the cost of the international price of crude oil would have no direct impact on how much you sell refined petrols in your country, because you don't have to, first of all, subject your templates to those international metrics. You just basically refine in country and sell in country. So you remove all that import component and all the dollar exchange rate components that exacerbate the difficulty you're having. So they've told us turnaround maintenance are on. Some of them will come up by the end of December 2022. So one would have thought that it would have been more reasonable that we allow those turnaround maintenance complete. Local refining has started to happen and ramping up capacity, and then we can gradually ease. Others have said, okay, because you cannot always trust government timeline, there is a Dangote refinery where they are ramping up capacity very fast, except for the delays that were brought in by COVID. Why not the government provide some kind of support, allow this refinery come on stream much earlier, and provide the local refining capacity that we need in country so that we can cut this cost down and provide this fuel at a much cheaper rate, and then you can remove whatever you call subsidy. So you see, the template varies, There is none that the government has met. Not its own turnaround maintenance, not the support that is needed to the Dangote refinery, not the mass transit system that are supposed to replace and cushion the cost of transportation, and we are in a hurry to just pull this money out in one form and then sink it into something else that also is shredded in a lot of controversy.
Okay, all right. Now, quickly, let's get perspectives also on this other story about Nigerian Air, to commence operations in April 2022. Very interesting. We saw the unveiling of the logo about more than a year ago or so. And now we are talking about the, commencement of the operations. How would you respond to these, or what are your thoughts around this?
Yeah, the moment those stories filtered in yesterday, somebody, a very good colleague and friend, said to me, this country is a Fuji house of commotion, and we all laughed about it, but seriously, that is what it is. Launching a new airline in the twilight of the life of this administration, it's amazing. And to think that you are coming out to make pronouncement, and in that pronouncement, you are not telling us whether you have signed any kind of agreement. We don't know who these private sector players are. You probably are going to start shopping for them now. Placements have not been made for this aircraft, whether it's, even if you need to do a wet lease or a dry lease, which is basically just going and renting airlines that are already in the shelves. Some kind of agreement will precede it. Some kind of inspections happen. When you bring them in country, there are procedures before any metal is allowed to start jumping from one end to the other. Mm-hmm. All of these things take anywhere around 6 months to 1 year. And then you sit at the end of November and you say by April. Now, we are not even clear with the announcement. So when you say it to be launched, would it just merely mean announcing Air Nigeria in April next year, or that will be when the planes will have been ready to start flying? So perhaps when we engage Hadi Sirika more from the journalistic perspective, we may be able to get an idea of what they are planning that we probably don't know, but what the experts are saying that this time is too short, it appears rather not visible. Okay.
Now, the minister revealed that Nigeria Air, when operational, will provide over 70,000 jobs. Well, some experts are saying what kind of jobs would they be doing really?
I am the thoughts of those the guess of those experts is as good as mine. I am just thinking around the airport and saying 70,000. Where would anybody be doing anything? I don't understand what quality of jobs he's talking about. I don't understand what kind of job he's talking about. Probably he has to break it down when we meet with him. But, well, it's exciting. Anything that will bring in extra job into this economy is exciting, because jobs have multiplier effect. If a man is gainfully employed, then he can provide for his family, then his children can get good schools, then he can meet his financial needs, and the services he procures, those people who sell services to him can also then meet their needs. So jobs are interesting, but we want to see the how. We want to see the what. Are they gainful employment? Let it not be anything like what the state governments do. They pack people, give them 5,000 naira to sweep the street, and they say, oh no, we have employed 100,000 people. So until we see the details, I think there is a cautious optimism around everything that they seem to have talked about.
All right then. Well, I think we would end the review at this point. Quite
Very
a lot of stories to look at,
but
but because of our time, we have to end it here. Thank you so much for joining this morning.
It's my pleasure as always.
All right, we've been speaking with Sunday Michael. He is the Deputy Business Editor, Daily Trust newspaper, giving us perspectives on the story that made the headlines. Now, we'll go on a quick break, and then when we come back, we will be looking at our first discussion of the day, talking about population growth in Nigeria is a thing of concern, really, if you look at
the rising number.
The rising number, and again, side by side with the infrastructural deficit that we are dealing with. So please stay with us.
Get latest updates on current topical issues and breaking news by downloading the TrustTV mobile app on your Android devices. Go online, click Google Play Store, search TrustTV, install the app, and get doses of unfiltered information on happenings all over the world in your pocket. TrustTV, documenting the Nigerian story. Get latest updates on current topical issues and breaking news by downloading the TrustTV mobile app on your Android devices. Go online, click Google Play Store, search TrustTV, install the app, and get doses of unfiltered information on happenings all over the world in your pocket. TrustTV, documenting the Nigerian story.
Thank you for staying with us. It's Daybreak, reaching you live from the nation's capital in Abuja. Now, we will be talking about population explosion. Nigeria is one of the most densely populated countries in Africa, with approximately 212 million people, and is also the country with the largest population in Africa and the 7th largest population in the world. Approximately 50% of Nigerians are urban dwellers, with the rate of urbanization being estimated at 4.3%. In 2021, Nigeria's population is estimated to amount to 213 million. The last population and housing census in Nigeria, which took place in 2006, put the country's population at 140 million. But currently, Nigeria's actual population is uncertain. Some analysts argue Nigerian authorities have been relying on estimates from Worldometer, an arm of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, to gauge the country's population. The Nigerian government has announced plans to conduct a national population and housing census in 2022. We have in the studio Dr. Eyitayo Oyetunji, Federal Commissioner representing Oyo State in National Population Commission, to talk to us about Nigeria's population explosion and the plans on ground to change the narrative. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. It's my pleasure to be with you this morning.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, now, very interesting, like we highlighted in our introduction. Each time we talk about Nigeria's population, we have all manner of figures that we quote, whether we say estimated 200 million, sometimes we say 180, sometimes we say 110, and so on. Do we have a domestically generated figure of Nigeria's population?
Well, when you use words like cook, it makes one to worry. Yes, we do have parameters by which our population is projected. It's not arbitrary. There are certain definite parameters which include death, birth, and migration. But you cannot have an accurate figure for a population except you have a population and housing census. And the farther away you are from the last one you had, the more likely that your estimates are becoming arbitrary. And like you noted, we're happy that by 2022, the country is likely to undergo another population and housing census. So, but in-house at the National Population Commission, using these parameters that I mentioned, which is death, birth, and migration, we have been able to do projections for the population at both national and sub-national level. Usually those figures you quote give only the estimates at national level. So it's only from the National Population Commission that you are likely to get estimates at sub-national level. That is estimates for each of the states in Nigeria. And as you mentioned in your introduction, by the projection that we did in mid-2020, at that time, Nigeria is estimated to have a population of 206. By this year, growing at the rate of 2.6% annually, the population is estimated to have increased to 211, thereabout.
Now, these parameters you mentioned, how reliable are they and how accurate are these parameters? You talk about the death rate, the birth rate. How do we even come about that?
Yes, like I mentioned, the farther away you are from a last census, the less accurate your estimates will be, because the 2006 is actually the baseline from which these estimates are calculated. And like you also noted, we're still grappling with statistics about death, for example. Incidentally, the National Population Commission is still responsible for registration of death and birth in Nigeria and also for migration. But I won't say we are doing very well with death registration simply because most people don't want to report that event when it happens. But even at that, we still try to use as much as possible other parameters to arrive at those calculations.
Okay. What are, some of the implications of this rising population on the Nigerian economy?
Sorry?
What are some of the implications of the rising population
Okay,
on
the
Nigerian
rising
economy?
population.
Yes.
Well, it's a challenge, really. Very often, people worry about a large population, but a large population in itself is not really a problem. What is more of a problem is the rapidity with which the population is growing. When you have a population that is growing at a rate that is faster than economic growth, that becomes a challenge. The challenges are far-reaching and multifaceted. You have challenges from economy. You mentioned urbanization, for example. When you have a lot of people moving into urban centers, you're unable to cope with the provision of infrastructure, for those people. And that means that many more people dwell in slums. And when people dwell in slums, there are health implications, there are crime implications, and so on. Also, you're unable to make provision for certain infrastructural and developmental facilities, like education, for example. When you have too many children coming into the economy, it's very difficult for you to make provision adequately for their educational needs, housing, health, and so on. So the real challenge that we have in Nigeria is that because of the rate at which we are growing, it's very difficult to get resources to make provision to cope with the increase in population at that pace. And yet, you cannot get the best out of your population if you don't make the right investment on the population. And you can't make the right investment on the population if the population is growing so rapidly.
So do you think population control can work in Nigeria?
Usually we don't like to use words like control. We shouldn't be controlling anyone. People should be informed about the right choices that they need to make. And that's what we're doing. We have a national population policy which was recently reviewed, and that revised edition has been approved by the Federal Executive Council. As a matter of fact, any moment from now, we expect Mr. President to launch the revised national population policy. That policy makes provision for so many interjections, interventions, and strategies towards managing the population. And I won't say it's not working, it's working. Perhaps not as much as we would like it to work, and perhaps not at the same pace in the different parts of the country. Because I must mention that there are large diversities in terms of the population profile in different parts of the country. So it's working, but it can do better. The major intervention that you require, to manage and to reduce the rate of population growth is family planning. And I would not say that family planning has been embraced as much as is required if really we want to address the rising population. Family planning is still very low in Nigeria, in almost every part of Nigeria. There are other incidental things that need to be addressed. For example, we need to reduce early marriage for young girls. That also is a challenge. We need education for the girls, because the longer the girls stay in school, the less likely that they are going to get married, the less likely that they are going to start early childbearing, and so on and so forth. So it's not hopeless, but there's still a lot to be done if we're going to address the rapid rate of the growth of the population.
All right, now how much relevance do we attach, to having this data? Because population census is meant to be conducted in the intervals of 10 years. The last one was in 2006. And if you do that calculation, by 2016, we are due for another census, but that didn't happen. And now we are in 2021. So how much of relevance do we really attach to this, as we, plan national development and growth?
I tell you quite sincerely that planning without evidence is very harmful, especially for a country like ours. You have limited resources, and if you want to make the optimum use of those resources, they must be targeted. You cannot target them if you don't have information on the population. You don't know who is where, you don't know how many people are where, and so on and so forth. For us in the National Population Commission, we are very passionate about conducting the next census. A lot of people think the time is inappropriate or is difficult because of security, because of lack of resources, because of the impending elections and so on. But for us, we have stayed too long without doing this. And we strongly believe that many of these challenges actually require data, require information if you're going to tackle them. If you're going to tackle insecurity, for example, you need information, you need data. We are almost concluding what we call the enumeration area demarcation of the entire country. Out of the 774 local governments, we've successfully demarcated 772 local governments. Now, the information from that activity is information about all the buildings in Nigeria and what they are being used for, whether they are residential, whether they are used for commercial purposes, whether they are educated. Every standing structure that's a building in every local government, in every ward, in every locality. In that exercise, we've been able to identify them, we've been able to note where they are geographically and so on. That kind of information you require to address the security challenges. For example, we have information about households in all those buildings. What I'm saying is that many of the very challenges that make us think we shouldn't enumerate the population are actually challenges that can only be addressed if we enumerate the population. So to go back to your question is that it is critically important, if we're going to use the limited resources efficiently and effectively, we must have information as the basis for planning. Otherwise, we're just throwing resources in the air. You're just imagining that, okay, there must be so number of people who need help here. There must be, you're not too sure whether they are there or not. And when you throw those resources there, you're not getting results.
Right.
That's why you see, for example, that in spite of the huge and the humongous budgetary allocations year in, year out, Nigerians continue to complain that they're not seeing changes. Part of the reason may be because the interventions are not hitting the right targets. And they are not doing so because we don't have information about those targets. So it's critically important.
Okay, some experts are of the opinion that Nigeria seems to be in some kind of demographic trap. Are we to say that? Do we describe it as that?
Well, I don't know what exactly you mean by demographic trap, I must say. What kind of trap are we saying now?
Largely because we don't have the accurate data.
Yeah, well, if that's what you mean, it's a trap. It's a problem. Let me put it that way. It's a problem, really. Honestly, it's a problem. For me, I've been in demographic activities for a long time. It's tragic. It's tragic that you continue to, even in your family, for God's sake. I mean, you don't have information about the family. How can you plan? How can you plan in advance? How can you even plan for the present? How can you know what you need in the next 5 years?
So, but, we have all sorts of programs run by the government, social intervention programs, for instance, where we hear that so number of Nigerians have been given so and so amount of money over the period of so and so. In fact, just this morning we were talking about how that the federal government intends to provide some kind of transport palliative in view of the plan to remove the fuel subsidy in the coming months. Now, Annalisa raised the issues as to Yes,
Yes.
there is. It's
everywhere on the newspaper.
Yes. It's planned to remove the fuel subsidy. So to cushion the effect of removing that subsidy, the federal government is saying we are going to, provide 5,000 naira transport, palliative, and all of that. And then analysts are saying, what's the modality, of determining how to, select those people that will benefit from these things when we do not have a data, like you just mentioned. So it goes back to the issue of, planning and interventions, and having the interventions getting the required results if we do not have the data. What data have we been using all along?
We've been using ancillary data. Government desires to make an impact. This government desires to. And really, they have to make the best with what's available. The Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, we do work together. They try to get some information from us, but most of that information is obsolete, really. But you cannot fold your hands and say you won't do anything. So government is still trying to see whatever can be done in the interim. And that's why it's because the government really wants to make this impact that the present administration has gone ahead to give the necessary support for the conduct of the next census. It takes a lot of courage at a time like this for that kind of support to be given. And Mr. President has shown clearly that he's very much interested in getting this same data that we're talking about. The interest is evident. You just heard about the NIPS that graduated, the National Policy for Strategic Study, National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies. The theme that he gave them is population and development. And for us too, you are aware that just earlier in the year, he gave National Population Commission as much as 10 billion to continue with the emission demarcation exercise. And now he's given a tacit endorsement for us to conduct the census next year. All of this is because government has understands the need for this data. But in the interim, they cannot fold their hands and say, look, until the census is conducted, we will not do any of those things. The government is still trying their best, and there are ancillary ways that you can get this information. It might not be as accurate as is desirable, but you still do try.
Okay. All right. Now, how much more do we need to do to make Nigerians really see the issue of population as a big issue? Because even when we have the resources, the truth is, if the population is beyond the resources, we may not have the desired, living standard that Nigerians, are all yearning for and looking out for. So, on the part of Nigerians, how much more do we need to do in making Nigerians to see the need to have, some kind of, since you say you don't want to use the word population control, to have some kind of, planning in terms of, population growth?
We have to keep talking about it, and that's why I'm here. I was delighted, when I was told that your program wants to focus on this, and immediately I said, look, whatever it takes, we have to be here, because we need Nigerians to understand the importance of these issues and to have a buy-in into why we need to do it. The reality is because of I don't want to use the word poverty, but because of the widespread lack and everything, I've been in a situation where someone say, hey, you want to use how many billions to count how many people there are? Just share that money to us, So because of poverty, people feel that, this one, that there's no money, you guys want to use the little resources to be enriching and all that. So we have to keep explaining. It's like education. You say, we have not gotten money to eat food. You say, I should go and pay my child's school fees. The choice is even more dangerous for you not to pay the school fees, because lack of that education is much more costly than how much you have to pay. So it is with having to have information, data about who we are. On the surface, you say, you want to spend so much money. But in reality, without that kind of, look, apart from even planning, information about the population helps you to hold government accountable.
Right.
That's how you know whether you say you have been spending money on this and that, where you are able to ask and say, look, but we just got information now that this is the number of people in school, these are the number, the population and housing census. The housing component of it is information about the living condition of households. In 2006, the information that was collected gives information about the standard of living of every household. Information about, for example, how many people are living in how many rooms. If I come to a household of 6 people and you have just a room you're living in, that tells a lot, because we ask such questions. What kind of equipment, material was used to floor your house? That tells us something about the standard of living. Do you have water within the house? Do you have to go to a well to get water? Where do you dispose of your refuse and so on? As a household, by the time you aggregate how many households have to go to the river to get water, you're beginning to have an idea about the infrastructural situation in that community. So using that kind of information, actually, you can hold government accountable. That we have not done census since 2006, it's not just that we don't have information to plan, we also have not had information to hold our government officials accountable. Because it's only when we have that kind of information that we show it to them and say, look, you say you've been doing this, but this is the reality,
Right.
you know, that you have. So we need to keep engaging Nigerians for them to know how valuable this is.
Okay.
All right.
Now, I really want to ask this question. Do we hope, to see the deployment of technology in the coming 2022, population census?
Thank you so much. I must tell you, as a matter of fact, for us in National Population Commission, we have deployed the latest technology for the next census. I am so proud to tell you that there has never been a time when we have taken advantage of technology as it is for this census. We've done things that even has not been done in other parts of Africa. We're using, for example, at the level of the enumeration area demarcation, we're using satellite imageries. We're not using sketches and maps and so on. Satellite imageries, are like photographs that have been taken from the space.
Right.
So when we talk about every building that I was talking about in Nigeria, we have pictures of them, all the buildings. By the time we say there are 6 people in this building, you will see the building where the 6 people are. That's novel. And for the first time, we're doing a digital census. It's not analog. We're not writing anything on paper. We're using handheld devices to take. That means from the beginning, the information is in the electronic form. You can use it for any kind of analysis. You can share it with any agency. From the moment you're taking, we've done that with the enumeration area demarcation. It was paperless. We didn't use any papers at all. So even data collection is electronic, it's digital already. And that's the first time that you have a census that is 100% digital. You're not going to see any paper at any point whatsoever.
Right.
Okay, so in light with this, the deployment of technology in this, have we considered maybe even prior to the census itself, maybe enrolling Nigerians, even using these digital platforms, maybe the website and all of that? Have we ever considered that, and is that a possibility?
Well, I'm not quite sure what you mean by enrolling Nigeria, but we have tested.
Counting Nigerians digitally.
Yes,
maybe demanding that Nigerians, maybe perhaps go to a certain portal, infuse their data there to show that, they are Nigerians and that they are counted, something like that.
No, for censuses in Nigeria, we've not reached the stage. Nigeria censuses are not purely statistical. There are political issues. So you cannot just say go and register and so on. We do what we call de facto census. We have to see you before you're enumerated. In other climes, you can do what is called a de jure census. You don't have to see the person. The person fills a form and sends it, to you. So, but in Nigeria, we do a de facto census. We must see the person before the person is enumerated. But in terms of test, In National Population Commission, we don't just go to the field.
How about the use of
pre-test.
fingerprints and all of that? Isn't that?
Yeah, it's the biometric attributes of the person. We take some aspect of that, but we're not going for a full-blown biometric sensors, which means that we're taking all the attributes, your face, your this, but we're going to take stuff like your fingerprints to check against double enumeration. The NIMC is already collecting the biometric attributes of everyone, and we don't want to repeat that, so to speak. But we're going to collect the if everybody had a NIN, for example, there will have been no need to do that. We'll just ask for your NIN and enumerate you. But because not everyone has, we're going to collect the thumbprint to check against double enumeration, so to speak.
Okay. Now
but talking about tests, whether we've tested this technology, as I speak with you, we're doing training now to do what we call the second pre-test across the country. Across every state, we're going to the field from 3rd to 10th December. Our enumerators will be in the field to go and test this technology, to test the methodology, to be sure, one, that people can handle it. Even the people who are engaging, the ad hoc staff, can they use this technology to be sure that we can get the right responses? To be sure, for example, whether, because we're doing online real-time enumeration, whether the service providers we're relying on for the backbone, of network, whether it's sufficient, whether it can work. So in National Population Commission, we test before we go. We've done a first one. This is the second pre-test we're doing, and we're going to do a trial census, like a mock census before the real one, to see that this technology actually is going to work for the main census. So all that we've taken into account.
Okay, that's very interesting to have that.
Quite interesting.
Well, let's go on a quick break now, and then when we come back, we'll take maybe one or two questions, and then we'll run up. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You are still watching Daybreak on Trust Television, and we are still discussing population explosion. Now, I am really curious to ask, do you have some form of synergy or collaboration with NIMC and other agencies, to get data with regards to population, and all of that?
Yes, we do. With NIMC specifically, we are the base upon which the entire program is built. You get identity from birth. You're who you are by birth. NIMC manages that identity, but they don't create the identity. So we actually do the registration of birth, and also when you are to exit the NIMC platform by death, we are supposed to be the ones to say, hey, this person has died. So get him off your data. So we are working now towards having interoperability between the two agencies. Presently, unfortunately, We are just moving away from analog birth and death registration to digital birth and death registration. When that is done and we have a digital database, then it's automatically going to be linked with the NIMSI database. You're not supposed to go to NIMSI and say, look, I'm 3 years old. No, they just come to our database and verify that this person was born so time in so place to so household and so on. Because as it is now, that is absent. You walk into NIMSI and you say, look, I'm 20 years old, and they have no any other way of verifying that beyond what you say. But very soon, we've actually launched the digital birth and death automated registration. And once that database comes on stream, it's automatically going to be linked with NIMSI. It's going to be linked with INEC. Recently, the INEC chairman was also saying that they require information about death in order to clean their voter register. How many people on that register have died? It's only us that should be registering. And I like you to keep joining us to appeal to Nigerians. We need to report death. There's no way we are going to capture everybody has died if deaths are not reported. Most of those who report mainly because they want to collect benefits and so on. But it's vital statistics that is needed. When you have information about death in an environment, after a while, you know the frequency of death and so on, you are able to track what is causing the death in that area. Is it malaria? Is it cholera? Is it what? And so on. It's something that part of our culture that nobody wants to talk about death.
All right. So are we looking at a way to, harmonize all this data such that we can have maybe some kind of digital central data, like some experts have advocated?
National data bank.
Yes, such that anyone looking for anybody, or even in terms of the fight against insecurity, for instance, is easy to track, and all of that.
Certainly.
Are we looking at that?
Certainly. Government has been working towards that over and over. Committees have been set up to harmonize data from all the relevant data generating agencies. There's supposed to be a national data bank. We're moving towards that. Look, from what I told you now, National Population Commission, we are the only ones who have a geographic database, geodatabase. That is a database that is geographically defined. If I say you are Musa living in so place, we have a geographical reference for where your building is, and so on and so forth.
With what we have
by the
so
time
far,
we link that with birth and death registration, where we're moving towards is that if we say a birth occurred, we're able to say it occurred in so location, So we can say that in so area, 6 people have had birth, 6 people have died, and so on. That way we're able to be improving on the last census, for example, how many people have died. And this information now can be linked to other agencies who know what is happening in every household and in every building and so on. These are all the reasons why we need data.
Okay. Yeah. So with what we have so far, how much of synergy is there with our security agencies in the fight against insecurity? And what role is this data supposed to play, in the fight against insecurity?
Well, present, security issues are not what you talk about in general. But sometimes, the agencies come to us to get information from our enumeration area data. Because like I told you, that's data that has subdivided this country into small units, every entire space of the country. So on that platform, you can see every building in everywhere. For example, in our enumeration area demarcation, we can see the villa. You understand? Every building is indicated, whether it's a rural building, whether it's a ruga, whether it's a farm settlement, whether we have information about them. We have information about how many households are in a ruga, for example, at the time we did the demarcation. So that information is available, and sometimes they do request for it. But
All right.
those are not details that we would like to discuss in a program like this.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the
Thank you
program
very
and
much,
sharing your thoughts with us on this program. We've been speaking with Dr. Eyitayo Oyetunji, Federal Commissioner representing Oyo State in the National Population Commission. Thank you again. We hope to have you again on the program.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure, and I must say we're happy with programs like this that bring information to Nigerians about population matters. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll look at yet again another issue of concern. This time looking at deforestation in Nigeria and how it is important, for us to safeguard our environment. Please stay with us.
Get latest updates on current topical issues and breaking news by downloading the TrustTV mobile app on your Android devices. Go online, click Google Play Store, search TrustTV, install the app, and get doses of unfiltered information on happenings all over the world in your pocket. TrustTV, documenting the Nigerian story. Get latest updates on current topical issues and breaking news by downloading the TrustTV mobile app on your Android devices. Go online, click Google Play Store, search TrustTV, install the app, and get doses of unfiltered information on happenings all over the world in your pocket. Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
All right, welcome back. Now, in 2010, Nigeria had 9 million hectares of forest, 336,000 hectares of which were primary forest. Nigeria has one of the highest rates of deforestation in the world, having lost around 410,100 hectares per year over the period of 2005 to 2010. Now, the main drivers of deforestation in the country are agriculture, logging, and mining. The removal of timber in Nigeria is occurring at an uncontrolled rate without strict adherence to laws or payment of appropriate fees and levies, contributing to increasing rates of forest loss. The annual rate of deforestation in Nigeria is 3.5%, approximately 350,000 to 400,000 hectares per year. Although Nigeria is blessed with biodiversity, the combination of extremely high deforestation rates, increased temperatures, and decreasing rainfall are all contributing to the desertification of the country.
Well, we have in the studio Dr. Yusuf Rigasa, an environmentalist, and he's going to be giving us perspectives on this issue of deforestation. Now, welcome to the program this morning.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, now let's begin with, we just finished talking about population explosion in Nigeria, and when you talk about deforestation again, is also a factor that affect deforestation, because there's more and more needs for people to settle and to acquire lands and all of that. How has it been an impact on this conversation?
Yeah, naturally, is one of the areas that we are defective is in the area of planning. Naturally, when you know that, okay, this is the way your population is going to grow, maybe 3, 4, 5%, then you need to provide the necessary infrastructure and resources that this number of people can be able to tap for their sustenance. But in a country where poverty is 70% or over that, and you realize job opportunities are very scarce, naturally people that are on the margin of survival, they rely on environmental assets for sustenance. And that is the reason why you see that as we urbanize, look at most of the state capitals are expanding rapidly. And as they expand, this number of people in these cities, they need energy, they need food, they need space, and other environmental assets. And as they tap this environmental asset, naturally, the environment is going to be degraded, and especially for the poor, their main energy and fuel source, is from the forest. And this is the major driver of deforestation in the rural areas. And even in some of our cities, you find out that people cannot even afford cooking gas. Cooking gas is now very scarce. I think as of yesterday, somebody was saying that 2.5 kg, he bought it at the rate of 9,000 naira. Now in a country where the minimum wage is 30,000 naira, just imagine. There is serious competition for fuelwood and charcoal. We move along our highways, it's unimaginable. I could remember that in 2018 at Paris, the president made a commitment that Nigeria is going to plant 15 million trees. Now we're in 2021. How many of those trees are actually on ground? Whether they are on ground or not, people must cook. And the only way and the cheapest way they can get fuel is through, fuel wood or charcoal. And unless we're able to find an alternative, and that alternative very fast, I think in the next 10, 20 years, we may wake up without any forest resource anymore. And as our forest goes, the same so will also be our wildlife. They will disappear because that is their habitat. So these are some of the major challenges.
Now, how does deforestation, affect our environment?
Yes, the simplest way to say it is that, forest is a habitat, but for man and other living things. So the less forest you have, it will shorten the way I look at it, if you look at the impact on human beings, is that it will shorten our life expectancy. If you look at life expectancy in Nigeria right now, it's about 53 years. And because forest generates resources, some human beings know, such as oxygen, quality, environment, and environmental resources. So as they go, the quality of environment will now go down, and that means that the quality of air you breathe will go down. Globally, WHO says that we lost about between 7 to 10 million people due to air pollution, and the only natural air filter that we know of are these forests. So when they go, what you expect is that the life expectancy here, will go down maybe to 50 years. And then when you look at other dynamics, other variables, it may even go down, much more. It will even be even lower than 50 years, because you have poverty, and these forests, they give people free resources, because you don't have to go to forests and plant anything. They have fruits, they have leaves, they have roots, they have barks, things that people rely on freely. We used to say agroforestry sometimes. So you don't even plant, you will still get something out of the forest. So as the forests disappear, the environment becomes degraded. And the component of environment, as you know, that are going to be degraded, the first is air quality, as I had mentioned earlier, because the trees are the air filter. Now, trees are not only filtering the air, they also play a significant role in terms of soil quality. Where there is no tree cover, that piece of land will be exposed to environmental dynamics such as erosion, flood. They will begin to happen as the land becomes degraded. Human beings must have to move. Without forest, as I mentioned earlier, the wildlife, that is where they live. So without trees, the wildlife will have to migrate if they have an alternative habitat, and if there is no alternative habitat, they die off. So you cannot quantify, in terms of naira and kobo, the value of, forest as a natural environmental asset, because they are a critical component of our survival on this planet. Without forest, for me, I believe that there will be no life. And even if you have a life, it will just be like Mars. When you look at the pictures of Mars, there is no vegetation. And that is the reason why it is not sustainable for human habitation. The only planet for human beings and humanity is the Earth, because this is where forest, vegetation, and other living things can flourish.
Okay. All right. Now we have quite a lot to contend with. On the other hand, we are dealing with food insecurity or food inflation, or you may say, as a result of physical security, which is also a problem. More and more Nigerians are having difficulty going to their farms and all of that. And so, how much of a problem is this, for this deforestation issue?
Well, if you look at it from one angle, you realize that agriculture is one of the drivers of deforestation, because you need to clear the forest before you can actually practice agriculture. But then it is up to policy formulators to look at the number of population that we have, the amount of forests that we have, and then the amount of food that the country as it in totality has, because sometimes countries such as Brazil and even us, now that we are trying to drive agricultural productivity through export, then we need to plant more than we can consume of certain cash crops. So we have to create an ecological balance, and on the other hand, try to marry this ecological balance with our economic needs. And in that way, we'll be able to say, okay, this is the amount of agriculture that is allowed, and agriculture is only allowed on this kind of areas, so as to maintain that balance that will be able to give us food security. For me, food security, yes, is very critical, but environmental security, or environmental, how do I put it, ecosystem stability, that's the best way to say it, because you need a stable ecosystem for you as a human being to be able to flourish. Where the environment is not stable, you have a lot of I can call it, say, entropy, environmental disorderliness. And where you have disorder, human beings, they either die or they have to migrate. Just look at the Lake Chad area, because the water is receding. Now we have conflict, and even in the absence of conflict, what I just observed last 2 weeks or so, we have our people from Zamfara, from Sokoto, from Katsina. They are migrating to Ondo State to practice farming. And what are they farming? Vegetables, tomatoes, cabbages, onions, the traditional stuff that they used to farm, up north. So because it's not only because they are not migrating for insecurity alone, they are migrating because their environment can no longer carry their economic needs. So it's very crucial for us to maintain ecological, equilibrium. At the same time, be able to meet our economic or socio-economic demands in order to address the issue of food security.
Okay. Now, President Muhammadu Buhari recently at the Climate Change Conference made a commitment that Nigeria plans to cut carbon emission to net zero by 2060. Do you think this is a realistic move?
Well, you can look at it as Nigeria. Sometimes politicians make some promises and commitments. And those commitments, though Nigeria will have the right the right institution for environmental governance, but these institutions usually they are not working together. They are working, say, in silos, and we need to bring them together to be able to meet this net zero emission by 2060. Yes, it is achievable, but it can only be achievable if we put the right structure in place and create the necessary linkages and provide them with the necessary human and financial capital. Because sometimes government make commitments, but then even though the institutions are there, when it comes to, say, addressing their human needs or their financial requirement, you find out that the money may not be there, the right people may not be in the right place, things like that. So, but this is not a presidential job, it's the job of every Nigerian. If you look at what happened in Glasgow, Nigeria has one of the largest delegations, virtually everybody that matters in environmental governance. They've been there. But the thing is that we have made an international commitment. So what is left for us is to come back home, sit together, and then clearly define roles and responsibilities, and then make resources available, to ensure that the promise that Mr. President has made, we are able to achieve it by 2060. It is achievable.
All right. Now, if we look at previous commitments that we have made, for instance, restoration of the degraded lands, for instance, and when we talk about that, the first thing that comes to mind is, for instance, the Ogoni cleanup that we, have always, heard about. Are we showing enough commitment to, restore these lands and to transit, and have alternative sources of energy and all that?
See, environmental restoration of degraded land is a long-term thing. Yes, if you look at it from the scientific point of view, if you want to restore a degraded environment, you need to start from the soil, then you need to start, then you move on to restoring the plants, then you move on to restoring the animal population of that particular environment, and then you try to create ecological balance, because in any ecosystem you have dominant species and you have species that just exist at the margin, at the periphery of survival. So for you to be able to restore this ecological balance is something that is very, very difficult, and we have not had the benefit of having the human and financial capital to study environmental restoration long term within our own environment. As I mentioned earlier, restoration is a long term. You are talking of 25, 30, 40, 50 years, because these forests that you are seeing around you, when God created them, only God knows how long it took for them to actually grow to the level that we are seeing them. And we need to empower our forest reserve supervisory agencies and human capital, or say staff of the forest resources, to be able to do their job and to do it very well up to global standards. But this kind of resource is always under pressure, as I mentioned earlier. Poverty is there, and when somebody is poor, people don't tend to care for the environment. They just want to survive from today to tomorrow. So we need to address poverty in order to sustain our environmental assets. And no matter what you invest in restoring your environmental assets, if the population is poor, they will always fall back on those assets in order to survive. So we need to create a balance between maintaining the quality of our environmental assets and bridging inequality and poverty in our population.
It's quite a very interesting issue because here we are. I've always referred to the removal of the fuel subsidy that we are talking about. So Nigerians are already panicking. We are already seeing the cost of gas, for instance, you know, hitting the roofs. How is this a challenge to achieving this net zero emissions and, you know, ensuring that we have a safe environment? Really?
If I should tell you my personal opinion, I believe that if you are going to remove the fuel subsidy and the environment has to pay for it, then it is not worth it. It's better to maintain the subsidy and maintain, you know, our environmental assets rather than to remove the subsidy and lose our environmental assets. So there has to be, this is the challenge of leadership, and we have leaders, and they have access to environmental experts at different levels. So they have to sit down and look at the dynamics. What will be the consequences of removing this subsidy? Already gas is up. Gas is not the best fuel because, you know, even gas is a fossil fuel itself. But at least it's not as, you know, as impactful as, you know, removing these forest resources and using them as fuel wood and charcoal. Government has to sit up and face this challenge because it is serious. Serious because it is being amplified by poverty. When people are poor, you know, you need to move along our highways, either along you know, Abuja to Lokoja or Abuja to Kano, and you see the quantum of fuel wood and charcoal that people are placing beside the road just for sale or for consumption. And this is these issues are more than even an environmental issues, because at the end of the day they become issues of national security. If I don't have fuel wood in my own area and you have, naturally I will come to your area and try to harvest them, and then from there, you know, people start fighting each other. If you go to Katsina, the size of fuel wood probably is the size of my finger, because in Katsina the vegetation is no longer there. And well, they've had governments, but yes, the effort of previous government has not been able to address the issue of fuel wood in such communities. So it's high time for those in charge of environmental governance to rise up to the challenge, as you say, to provide alternative, you know, fuel, or even if we can provide electricity free of charge or at subsidized rate, so that people will leave these trees alone. It's high time we make that statement. Right. Leave the forest alone. Let's find an alternative. That is the best way, you know, for the environment and for our survival in the country that we call ours, Nigeria. Okay.
Now let's talk about wildlife. You know, many would say wildlife has gone extinct in Nigeria. What is it really that Nigeria is doing wrong?
Well, I can't say that the wildlife has gone extinct. Well, maybe they might have gone out of Nigeria, just like you see a lot of Nigerians running away. If Nigeria is not comfortable for you, there are maybe almost around 200 countries that you can migrate to at your own choice. So it's the same thing that applies to wildlife, because they don't need passport, they don't need visa. If Nigeria is not comfortable for a bird, elephant or lion, it's very easy. They move to another country where there
are no boundaries. No.
And because we have so many people now looking for, just look at guinea fowl, for example. You know, guinea fowl is a wild bird. We used to enjoy that delicacy when we were growing up. But now, when you move along the road, you see, you know, eggs of guinea fowl in hundreds. And how you call it, kwaria, you know, hundreds. You see them in bags. They are selling the eggs. So if you poach the eggs of guinea fowl, how do you expect them to, the numbers, you know, to be that high to be able to sustain the population? Not only guinea fowl, we have makwalwa. Now you don't see them as much.
Yes,
So these are some of the environmental assets that our forefathers used in order to, as a source of protein, you know, for generations. But now, because we want to consume, you know, the eggs of guinea fowl, now that the population has gone down to a level where you can consider guinea fowl as being threatened, because now you don't see them in that numbers. So it's up to, because most states, I have the privilege of working as general manager of Kaduna State Environmental Protection Agency. You realize that most states, even at the federal level, what we are doing on conserving biodiversity is very minimal. And all these environmental components are linked to each other. We have Department of Forestry. We are serious about waste management. You can see a lot being done on sanitation. You can see a lot being done in deforestation through the Great Green Wall. You have Department of Erosion, Flood and Watershed Management. But when it comes to biodiversity, we don't think it is important, but it is very important. Without biodiversity, we will not have the quality of environment that we truly have. What we have as in biodiversity assets in Nigeria alone, is more than what you find in Europe or United States. And we need to wake up that some of these species, you can even look at, mosquito. About 5-6 species of mosquito. The only one that is popular here is Anopheles, because that's the one that bites us and gives us malaria. But there are other species of mosquitoes that you find, within our environment that you don't find them elsewhere. So we need to rise up, from our academic institutions, because I consider them not doing enough in terms of documenting, biodiversity assets. If you ask the University of Abuja and other universities, what are the biodiversity assets that are in this town?
Okay.
We don't know.
Right.
So we need to document this biodiversity and educate our children that these are the things that we have, so that collectively we can find a way of conserving them for future generations.
Okay. Now, from all that we have said so far, there's one common denominator, which is a major factor: poverty. Even for us to leave the trees alone, there will be some kind of funding that is needed.
Yes.
Which is why part of the conversations at the COP26 is issue of climate change fund and all of that. Looking at it from the international perspectives, have we seen enough commitment from some of these developed countries as far as the conversation about climate change fund is concerned?
Well, personally, I don't think that there is enough commitment, but it's across the board. The developing countries are asking for finance because they believe that developed countries are the major drivers of this climate change. We need resilience, we need adaptations and mitigations, and this thing costs a lot of money that developing countries don't really have. But then there are things that we can do as citizens, as communities, within our own smaller areas to build up resilience. As I mentioned, we've been discussing now the cheapest way of building resilience is by planting trees. But then when you are poor, there's limits. When you are poor,
really will think about planting trees.
There are a combination when you are poor and you are ignorant at the same time, which means that the quality of education that we are giving our communities from primary to university education, the environmental component is either non-existent, or if it is there, it is not functional. We need to educate our people right from kindergarten to maybe even doctorate level. I did my PhD in waste management, solid waste management in particular. I did my master's in what I call industrial environmental management, where you try to treat wastewater that are coming from the industries. But what is lacking here is that if you go to a place, say like Kaduna, for example, and you ask a primary school students, what are the major trees, in Kaduna, he doesn't know. If you ask a university student, they don't know the dominant trees, that you can find in the forest. But these are things that you can get from your grandparents. We have Samia, we have Dorawa, we have Tabo, we have things like that. So these are things that children should have at their fingertips. And when it comes to birds, as I mentioned, we have guinea fowl, we have makorwa, we have even different species of chickens. Now everybody is consuming imported chicken. We have forgotten that what were our parents consuming before us. And we need to conserve that for those that are coming after us. Environment is about, continuity. Every day you hear about sustainability. Yes, sustainability is about continuity and conservation and protecting environmental assets from one generation to the next. We shouldn't consume anything. So because we don't want to consume everything, that is the reason why we should leave the trees alone. The generations that are coming after us should be able to know that there were forests in this particular area of the world, and these are the dominant species. Even if we can't tell them these are the various uses of individual species, we should be able to hand them over the way we met them, so that probably they could find better uses for them.
Now, if you look at the demand for rosewoods, for instance, would you consider that a problem in Nigeria?
Yes, it is. It is. When you have an environmental asset that you yourself, you have no value for them, somebody elsewhere has, they've come into the country, they have seen value in those things. They are paying peanuts to steal our environmental inheritance, because that's the way I see it. Because our parents or our grandparents probably had use for those things, but they decided to leave them for our own benefit. So we need to be able to sustain those resources, not only for ourselves, for the future generations. And the only way we can do that is that we need to formulate the right policies, and we need to enforce them. It's not yes, if you need rosewood, we are not saying that you shouldn't come and buy them, but we need to be able to assess the assets that we have. Maybe we can only sell 1% or 2% or 3%, and then we keep on replanting. As we deplete the assets, we keep on, investing in those resources.
Do we have policies protecting that?
We have policies to protect them, but you see, as I mentioned before, the federal government, is the major player when it comes to environmental governance. When you move down to state and local governments, you find out that the state and local government are virtually not doing anything. So environmental assets now are at the mercy of, the masses. And the masses, as I said earlier, they are poor, they are hungry, and they will sell virtually anything to survive. Is it their fault?
Well, very, very interesting thoughts there. I think we have to end the discussion here.
Yeah, leave the trees alone. I got that.
I think that's the takeaway for our viewers and for everyone else. It's very important that we leave the trees alone, because, you may not know the impact that these have on our environment, but believe me, they make great impacts. Like one of them that our guest mentioned, they filter the air for us, and that in itself, I would say, everything,
life,
because air is life. So thank you so much for coming and sharing your thoughts with us on the program this morning. We've been speaking with Dr. Yusuf Rigasa. He is an environmentalist, giving us, perspectives on why we need to leave the trees alone. Thank you. We look forward to having you again.
Thank you for the discussion.
All right. Well, let's take a quick break now, and then when we come back, we'll be rounding up the show. Please stay with us.
Get latest updates on current topical issues and breaking news by downloading the TrustTV mobile app on your Android devices. Go online, click Google Play Store, search TrustTV, install the app, and get doses of unfiltered information on happenings all over the world in your pocket. TrustTV, documenting the Nigerian story.
All right, this is Daybreak, but we have to go. But before that, let's take a look at this video, that surfaced on social media where a traveler along the Abuja-Kaduna way, was talking to some passengers along the roadside saying that bandits were operating on that road and they were not able to move. Just take a look at the video.
In a village called Rijana, along Kaduna-Abuja Expressway. We've been here for over 2 hours. That the road has been blocked by bandits. They've been operating in the daylight freely. We've been here, you can see both lanes, left and right. You can see fleet of cars. You can see people, everybody's stranded. And the security agents have not been here. And this operation has been going on for more than an hour now. At the back here, you can see it's a terrible holdup. You can see fleet of trailers. Here you can see vehicles, private, commercial, and even government vehicles parked both left and right. I'm here with some gentlemen. I want to interview him. Malam, assalamu alaikum. Dala malam, ina so in san sunanka.
Sunana Aliyu.
Sunanka Aliyu, daga ina kake?
Zamfara.
Daga Zamfara, ina zaka je?
Zani je Abuja.
Zaka je Abuja. To me yasa ka tsaya a wannan wurin?
Dan kidnapping.
Kidnappers. A ina suke?
Suna nan ne wajen Rijana.
Wajen Rijana. Tun yaushe kuka tsaye a nan?
Kai wajen misalin karfe awa 2.
Kun kai wajen awa 2 kuna zaune a nan. To me zaka ce akan wannan hali da kasar nan muka tsinci kanmu a ciki?
To gwamnati ta taimaka ta agaza mana dan Allah ta tallafa da harkar tsaro.
To na gode Malam Ahmadu. Allah shi kara kare mu. You can see I've just spoken with one of the people and there's a lot of crowd here and the parks are keep piling, cars are keep piling, vehicles are keep piling everywhere, left and right. You can see women with their children. You can see travelers, hoarders, everywhere. I'm here in the mix of some other crowds. I want to speak to somebody. Assalamu alaikum malam. Da Allah malam menene sunanka?
Sunana Sahabi.
Sunanka Sahabi. Yanzu daga ina kake?
Daga Rijana.
Daga Rijana, a nan garin kake? Daga ina ka fito yanzu?
Na fito daga Rijana zan je Abuja.
Ka fito daga Rijana zaka je Abuja. To me naga mutane an yi cinciru da motoci ba iyaka an tsaya a nan wurin.
Wallahi barayi suka tara hanya.
Barayi ne suka tara hanya, tun yaushe aka tara hanyar nan?
To misalin dai yanzu dai zai kai awa 1 kenan tara hanya.
Ya kai wajen awa 1 ana wannan operation din. Kuma babu wani labarin jami'an tsaro ko wani abu.
Sun ma gan mu sun gudu.
Sun gan ku jami'an tsaron sun gudu.
Sun bar mu.
Sun bar ku. To Allah shi kiyaye. Naga amma to hanyar duka guda biyu da na dawowa da na tafiya duk kowa ya tsaya. Dole ko? To yanzu ya za a yi mu wannan matsalan a samu mafita? Za a ci gaba da zama nan ne ko ya za a yi yanzu? So na gode, Allah shi kara kare mu. You can see the fleet of vehicles coming in. You can see them, everybody is.
Well, very, very sad scene there. For the past few days, the Abuja-Kaduna road seemed to have come under heavy attack, and we're not seeing commensurate response, to this attack. Going by what this video is suggesting, those commuters have been on that road for more than 2 hours, waiting for an intervention by security forces. Only God knows. Where are they? What are they up to? Are they aware that this is happening? And what's the means of communicating this, between the commuters and whoever is on duty or whoever is, supposedly on the road to patrol and all of that? Well, I hope that we come off this as soon as possible.
This has been lingering for too long, and I just really hope, the government does something about this, because people are already tired. It's really tiring. Well, with that, we come to the end of the show this morning. We hope that you join us again tomorrow for another time on the program. My name is Aiwele. In case you've missed all the interesting discussions we had today, you can catch up on our YouTube and also follow us across all social media handles for news and current affairs. Thank you for watching. Bye for now. Zainab Bala, have a lovely day.